She was told the accident was her fault, told she would never walk again, told to stay silent if she wanted her father to keep his job. But everything they said was a lie. When a retired Navy SEAL K-9 took apart the braces she'd been forced to wear, he uncovered something terrifying. Metal twisted not by chance, but by intention. Someone wanted this girl crippled forever. Someone wanted the truth buried. But what they didn't expect was a soldier and his loyal German shepherd stepping back into battle. This time, not against an enemy overseas, but against a corporation powerful enough to ruin anyone who stood in their way. Before we begin, please let me know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below. Cold winter air settled over the mountain town like a quiet, heavy blanket, pressing silence into every dark corner. The small repair shop at the edge of the pine forest hummed softly with the last glow of evening light, its metal walls resonating with the muted sound of tools resting after a long day. Inside, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a weathered face and sharp, watchful eyes moved with slow precision as he tightened a bolt on an engine. His rugged jaw carried the shadow of a short military beard, the kind grown from old habits rather than style. His dark hair, cut short by discipline he never fully abandoned, contrasted with the faint scar running from his temple to his cheek, an old reminder of close calls he rarely discussed. Though he wore civilian flannel and work pants now, nothing could disguise the quiet alertness and posture of a former Navy SEAL K-9 operator who still carried battlefield instincts under his skin. At his feet, a large German shepherd rested on the cold concrete floor, curled yet alert, ready to rise at the slightest shift in energy. The dog's coat was a striking blend of black saddle fur over warm tan, dense around the neck like a natural protective collar. His amber eyes were sharp and deeply intelligent, the eyes of a seasoned partner who had served on missions most people would never believe. Ranger was 7, old enough to have scars hidden beneath his coat, yet young enough to move with quiet purpose. He guarded the man not just as a duty, but as a vow carved into his very being. The sound of gravel crunching outside broke through the quiet rhythm. Ranger's head rose instantly, ears stiffening with recognition of unfamiliar yet distressed footsteps. The man paused mid-motion, sensing the shift in Ranger before he even heard the approach. He wiped his hands on a rag, his shoulders tensing slightly. At this hour, unexpected visitors meant one of two things: trouble or desperation. He stepped toward the door, Ranger already shadowing his movement. As the door opened, a gust of cold air swept in, along with the figure of a middle-aged man standing beneath the dim light. The newcomer was tall, though slightly hunched, as if carrying burdens that had bent his spine over the years. His thick beard, peppered with gray, framed a face carved by hard labor, lost sleep, and years of quiet suffering. His jacket was worn from long shifts and bitter winds, and his boots bore the grime of factory floors. Yet there was a softness in his eyes, a father's helpless love held together by fear for his child. Beside him stood a young woman whose presence drew the eye not by brightness but by fragility. She was 21, but the pain stitched into her posture made her seem older and younger at once, older from suffering, younger from being denied a real adulthood. Her auburn hair hung in loose waves, sticking to her pale cheeks where cold wind had painted faint, uneven blush. Her eyes were gentle, the kind that once held laughter, but now held quiet endurance. Metal leg braces wrapped around her legs from thigh to calf, thick and heavy, forcing each step into a slow, trembling negotiation with gravity. Her right brace locked for a moment, making her stumble until the man beside her caught her with practiced urgency. The father cleared his throat, voice rough like gravel under pressure. "Evening," he murmured, holding his daughter steady. His gaze darted to Ranger, but the German shepherd simply stood still, observing with calm, discerning intelligence. The father seemed relieved. He had expected danger, but found something steadier instead. The girl attempted a smile, a frail gesture unable to hide the pain trembling beneath her ribs. As she shifted her weight, the braces hissed and scraped, causing her jaw to tighten. Ranger approached her cautiously, head lowered in gentle curiosity. When he rested his head lightly against her knee, the girl's shoulders loosened with the smallest sigh, as if touched by a kindness she had not felt in a long time. The tall man, Logan Carter, gestured for her to sit. His voice was low, steady, the voice of someone who had guided others through chaos. "Take your time," he said softly. The girl exhaled shakily as she lowered herself onto a stool, the braces clanking with pitiless weight. Her father hovered beside her, ready to catch her again if needed. Logan's eyes shifted to the father, measuring the man's exhaustion, the guilt heavy on his shoulders. "Tell me what happened," Logan said. The father swallowed hard, removing his hat with calloused hands that trembled slightly. "Her name is Lily," he said quietly. "My daughter." His voice softened with aching affection. "She used to run everywhere. Couldn't slow her down if I tried." Lily looked down, fingers twisting her coat, shame flickering through her expression, not because she was weak, but because she hated being seen this way. The father continued, voice growing tight. "Last year at the company I worked for, Hawthorne Dynamics, they were testing a new industrial unit. Big, automated, not fully stable." His jaw clenched as if biting back anger. It malfunctioned, collapsed right on her. Lily winced, her eyes flinching at the memory she had tried so hard to bury. Her father continued, bitterness deepening. "They blamed her for standing in the wrong place. Filed the report as user error. Told me to keep quiet if I wanted to keep my job." His voice shook. "And they gave her these braces, called them compensation, said they were cutting edge." Logan stepped closer, studying the braces with an expert's eye. He had handled gear meant to keep soldiers alive, gear engineered to withstand war. These braces? They were wrong, brutally wrong. The joints were misaligned, weight distribution skewed, pressure points placed where nerves would scream under strain. These weren't assistive, they were torturous. Lily sensed his realization. She lifted her chin slightly, voice hushed but honest. "Every step feels like fire," she whispered. Her words held no self-pity, only quiet truth spoken by someone who had already endured too much. Ranger gave a soft whine and rested his head against her leg again, as if promising protection. The father rubbed his forehead with shaking fingers. "Doctors said she'd have to live with it, that this is the best we'll get." The weariness in his voice was the kind that carved itself into bones. Logan watched him, recognizing a familiar grief, the grief of being forced to accept an unacceptable truth. It pricked at old wounds in his memory, moments when he'd been powerless to save teammates he should have saved. "Why come to me?" Logan asked, though the answer trembled in the air already. The father straightened, pulling strength from a place only parents knew. "Because you fix the things no one else can. People around town talk. They say you saved men who shouldn't have lived. Rebuilt gear in the field with nothing but grit." His eyes brimmed, but did not fall. "I'm begging you. Please, she can't live like this." Lily met Logan's gaze, eyes full of exhaustion, fear, and the thin thread of hope she hardly dared trust. The room hung in silence for a moment. Ranger broke it, stepping forward and gently nudging Lily's trembling hand with his nose. She let out a tiny, broken laugh, the first sign of warmth since she entered. Logan looked between the girl, the dog, and the desperate father. Something old stirred inside him, a vow he once made to protect the helpless, a vow he thought he'd buried with his uniform. He inhaled deeply. "I'll look," he said at last. "I can't promise anything, but I'll try." Thomas's breath shuddered with relief. Lily blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Logan knelt beside Ranger, meeting Lily's gaze with steady, quiet resolve. "I saved men who had already died once," he murmured. "Maybe I can save your legs, too." And with those words, the faint spark of hope inside Lily flickered back to life, fragile, trembling, but alive. Winter clouds hung low over the mountain town, casting a muted gray light over the repair shop as the morning crept in. Inside, the warmth of a small space heater fought against the cold, filling the room with a quiet hum that blended with the faint breathing of the German shepherd resting near the door. Logan Carter stood at his workbench, the worn metal surface covered with tools, wires, and the disassembled pieces of the leg braces he had removed from the young woman the night before. His jaw was set in a hard line, the muscles tightening every time he examined another misaligned joint or another pressure plate carved with suspicious, unnatural bends. He had seen faulty equipment before, gear that malfunctioned under stress, devices that failed due to negligence. But what lay before him was different, carrying the unmistakable signature of intention rather than accident. Lily sat quietly at the far end of the shop, wrapped in a blanket Logan had given her to keep warm. Without the braces, her legs seemed more fragile, pale skin bruised in places where metal had pressed too deeply for too long. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, catching the dim light in soft, wavering strands. Her eyes followed Logan's movements, her expression a mixture of hope and dread, as if she feared the truth even more than the pain. Ranger lay beside her, his large body positioned protectively near her feet, ears flicking whenever she shifted or winced. The dog's silent vigilance seemed to reassure her more than any words could. Thomas stood near Logan, hands shoved into the pockets of his worn jacket, shoulders heavy with years of regret and worry. The deep lines in his forehead seemed deeper today as he watched Logan analyze the metal pieces. Thomas's beard, slightly unkempt and streaked with gray, moved with each slow exhale of anxiety. His dark eyes, normally softened by his gentle nature, were sharp with fear. Fear not for himself, but for his daughter, whose suffering he had been powerless to stop. Logan lifted a bent steel support rod, turning it in his hand. His scar caught the light as he frowned in concentration, the faint white line slicing diagonally across his cheek like a quiet reminder of battles past. He had faced danger far more visible than this, but something about the silent cruelty behind these devices stirred a deeper anger than he expected. "These angles," he muttered, his voice low and tight. "Whoever designed this didn't just screw up. They made sure she wouldn't walk right again." Lily swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the blanket tighter. "I knew it wasn't me," she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. "They kept saying I stood in the wrong place, that I didn't pay attention, but I did. I swear I did." Her voice trembled under the weight of long-held guilt that never belonged to her. Thomas stepped forward, his boots scraping against the concrete. "I saw it with my own eyes," he said, his tone thick with bitterness. "That machine wasn't stable. It glitched twice earlier that day, and I reported it. They ignored me, and when it fell..." His voice broke. He looked at Lily, pain tightening his features. "It could have killed her." Logan set the rod down with deliberate care, as though handling a weapon rather than a piece of medical equipment. He approached Lily, kneeling beside her, so their eyes met at the same level. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said firmly. "This wasn't your fault, and I'm going to prove it." Ranger nudged Logan's shoulder gently, as if urging him onward. The dog's steady amber eyes reflected quiet understanding, a silent communication formed through years of partnership. Logan rested a hand briefly on the dog's head before standing again. He reached for the final piece of the braces, an internal hinge mechanism that should have been smooth and supportive. Instead, it bore gouges that forced the hinge to lock unpredictably, like a trap waiting to snap. Logan held it between his fingers, his voice almost a growl. "This isn't an accident. Someone modified this. Purposefully." Lily's eyes widened, disbelief mixing with an almost resigned acceptance. Modified? Why? Why would anyone? "To cover their tracks," Logan answered before Thomas could respond. "If the machine failed, they needed to make the injury look like it was partly your fault. And if you couldn't walk properly afterward, well, they could claim permanent damage due to your own instability." Thomas slammed his fist against the table, startling both Lily and Ranger. The father quickly pulled back, ashamed of the outburst. "I told them," he said, his voice shaking. "I told them I wouldn't stay quiet, and they threatened to fire me, threatened worse." He rubbed his forehead, eyes closing in pain. "I couldn't lose my job. We had bills, treatment costs. I didn't want to fail her again." Logan didn't judge him. He'd seen good men trapped by circumstances they didn't create, forced into silence by systems too powerful to fight alone. He crossed his arms, studying the disassembled braces once more. "Who handled the equipment after the accident?" he asked calmly. Thomas hesitated, then said, "There was a supervisor. Name's Harold Benton. Tall man in his 50s, sharp face, silver hair combed back like he's always ready for a photo. He's the kind who never gets his hands dirty, but likes to pretend he runs the whole place. Cold man. Didn't even look at Lily when she was on the ground. He just barked orders to get the unit out of sight." Logan absorbed the description, storing it away. He had met men like Harold before, men shaped not by trauma or hardship, but by greed, ego, and cowardice. Men who hid behind titles, policies, and protocols, while real people paid the price for their decisions. He turned back to Lily. "I'm going to remove the rest of these components, clean them, and rebuild what I can. But it will take time, and it won't fix the underlying damage your legs went through in the accident." He paused, watching her carefully. "It might be painful." Lily drew in a slow breath, her frail shoulders straightening with soft, determined courage. "Pain doesn't scare me anymore," she said quietly. "Losing hope does." Thomas looked away, his jaw trembling, overwhelmed by the quiet strength in his daughter's words. Logan began laying out new parts, scavenged from old exoskeleton training gear and mobility devices he had repaired in the past. His movements were deliberate, methodical, almost meditative. As he worked, he explained what he found. "These braces weren't meant to help you. Someone intentionally altered them. See this?" He held up a steel insert. "Pressure point, nerve contact. They knew exactly where to hurt you." Lily felt her breath falter. Ranger nudged her arm gently, sensing her distress. Thomas whispered, "God, they destroyed her life." "Not yet," Logan said. "Not if I can help it." He continued examining each piece until the full picture became unmistakably clear. The braces had been intentionally sabotaged to worsen Lily's mobility, ensuring she could never stand as a reliable witness to the truth of the accident. When Logan finally stepped back, his hands resting on the table's edge, his eyes were cold and steady. "This is evidence," he said, "evidence of their wrongdoing, and it's dangerous to expose, but you deserve justice." Lily looked up at him, her voice trembling. "What are you going to do?" Logan exhaled slowly, Ranger standing beside him like a shadow ready for the next mission. "This is going to be dangerous," he said quietly, "but I won't let them destroy your life." Lily's eyes glistened with tears she refused to shed. Thomas placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. Ranger leaned closer to her legs. And in that small repair shop, surrounded by metal, tools, and truth too long buried, a silent vow formed, one that would change all of their lives. The morning air carried a brittle chill as pale sunlight filtered through the workshop windows, illuminating the scattered tools and metal parts that had become the center of Logan's world over the past days. The shop felt tighter now, filled with tension, determination, and the quiet aches of three people fighting a battle they never asked for. Logan stood at his bench, sleeves rolled past his forearms, revealing old scars and hardened muscle shaped by years of field work and countless missions where precision meant survival. His dark brows were furrowed as he adjusted the hinge on a new prototype brace. His hand steady even as frustration gnawed at the edges of his patience. Lily watched him from across the room, sitting on a low wooden stool with Ranger beside her. Without the braces, her legs remained fragile, covered in fading bruises and long, pale scars from months of pressure. Her auburn hair hung loosely over one shoulder, and her greenish-brown eyes tracked every motion Logan made, studying him as much as her fate rested in his hands. She looked exhausted but quietly resolute, her breath slow and measured, as if she were gathering the strength she knew she would soon need. Thomas stood behind her, arms crossed tightly over his chest, his gaze fixed on Logan with a mixture of fearful hope and protective desperation. The creases around his eyes deepened with every moment he realized how much pain his daughter was still enduring. His rugged features, thick beard, tired eyes, shoulders weighed down by responsibility, made him appear older than his years. He looked like a man who had worked too hard and slept too little for far too long. Logan held up the first prototype, examining it one last time before kneeling in front of Lily. "This one is sturdier than the last," he murmured, checking the straps and hinges. "But I need to know how it reacts under your weight." Ranger shifted his stance, as though preparing himself for the trial as much as Lily was. Lily nodded slowly, pressing her lips together as Logan secured the braces to her legs. The cold metal touched her skin, sending a familiar sting through her nerves. She rose carefully, Thomas hovering close but not touching her. The first step was small, tentative. The second came with more effort, her breath catching in her throat. The third step. A loud snap erupted from the right hinge. The brace buckled violently, sending Lily collapsing to the ground. Thomas rushed forward, catching her before she hit the floor. Ranger barked sharply, ears pinned, reacting to her cry of pain. Logan was beside her within seconds, his jaw clenched as he inspected the broken hinge. Lily winced, forcing a shaky exhale. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her voice betrayed the lie. Thomas hugged her close, trembling. "No," he said softly, "you shouldn't have to be okay with this." Logan lifted the damaged brace, examining the fractured joint. "Metal fatigue," he muttered. "I need to reinforce this section." His frustration was evident, but he buried it beneath a layer of disciplined calm. He had been in situations far worse than this, situations where lives depended on improvisation. But this was different. Here, the enemy wasn't a battlefield or an insurgent force. It was deliberate cruelty concealed behind corporate machinery. He returned to the workbench, dismantling and rebuilding with renewed focus. Hours passed. The sound of grinding, tightening, adjusting filled the shop. Lily watched him work with a fragile hope she was terrified to trust. Her hands rested on Ranger's fur, grounding herself in the warmth the dog provided. Thomas paced near the window until a sudden knock broke the rhythm of the room. Logan looked up sharply, eyes narrowing. Thomas stepped forward cautiously and opened the door just a crack. A delivery man stood outside, tall and lanky, wearing a brown uniform jacket. His hat sat crooked on his head, and he looked no older than 30. He offered a nervous smile, revealing slightly crooked front teeth. His face held a certain boyish innocence, but his posture suggested he was wary of something. Perhaps the cold, perhaps the tension he could feel pouring from the workshop. Package for a Mr. Carter," he said, pulling out a clipboard. His voice was light but anxious, and his fingers tapped the box he held as though he sensed the unease inside. His name tag read, "Evan, a simple young man, just doing his job." Thomas took the envelope attached to the box. As soon as he saw the logo, Hawthorne Dynamics, his expression darkened. "Logan," he said sharply, handing it over. The envelope was thin and formal. Inside was a letter printed on heavy paper. "Cease interference with proprietary medical equipment. Continued tampering will result in legal consequences. Final warning." Lily's face paled. Thomas clenched his teeth. Logan read the letter twice, cold anger settling into his eyes. "They're watching us," he said quietly. "They know what I'm doing." Evan shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. I should get going," he muttered, before retreating quickly to his truck. Logan tore the letter in half. "We're not stopping." Lily watched him, her heart thudding with a mixture of fear and admiration. She had never seen someone stand up to Hawthorne before, not like this, not with such certainty. He prepared the second prototype. It looked sturdier, thicker, reinforced with steel plates salvaged from old exoskeleton joints. But when Lily tried to take a step, the left joint twisted unexpectedly, throwing her off balance. Thomas grabbed her again, his breath sharp with panic. Logan grimaced at the metal's warping. "Not enough stabilization," he said. "I need a different alloy." The third model came hours later, lighter, smoother, carefully aligned. Lily strapped it on with careful hands, bracing herself. She took one step, two. Then suddenly her leg went numb. She gasped, gripping the edge of the table to keep from falling. Logan knelt immediately, checking her pulse, testing her reflexes. "The pressure pad compressed your nerve," he said, furious at the unexpected outcome. "Damn it!" Lily blinked back tears, not from pain, but from frustration. "It's not your fault," she whispered. The fourth prototype was the most ambitious yet. Logan had redesigned the hinge structure entirely, adding a spring mechanism intended to mimic natural motion. When Lily attempted her first step, Ranger growled suddenly, ears flattening. Logan looked up too late. One of the springs recoiled violently, snapping back with dangerous force, narrowly missing her knee. Lily froze, breath shallow. Ranger's bark echoed through the shop. Logan tore the brace from his hands, slamming it onto the bench with controlled fury. "This is deliberate sabotage in the original design," he said. "They built those braces so they would fail. Every part I reuse fights against me." For a long moment the room was utterly silent, except for Lily's trembling breath. Then she lifted her head, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. "I want to walk," she said, voice breaking. "Not for me, not anymore." She looked at her father with fierce, tender determination. "I want to walk so I can protect him." Thomas's breath caught. Ranger pressed his head against Lily's leg as if offering strength. Logan turned slowly, his expression shifting. Her words struck something deep inside him, something that had been dormant since leaving the SEALs. This wasn't just a repair job anymore. It was an act of defiance, a fight for truth, a mission. He looked at her with a new kind of resolve. "Then we keep going," he said softly. "This isn't just about braces. This is about justice." And for the first time since the accident, Lily felt the faint spark of something she once believed she had lost. Purpose. The wind outside carried a restless hum through the pine trees as the workshop lights flickered over scattered metal scraps and soldering tools. Logan stood at the center of it all, shoulders squared, eyes sharp with the focus of a man who had spent hours perfecting something that mattered far more than any battlefield invention he had built in the past. Before him lay the fifth prototype, a brace lighter than the others, crafted with precise angles and self-adjusting hinges, inspired by mobility exosuits he once used during nighttime reconnaissance missions. The metal gleamed under the workshop lamp, shaped with care rather than cruelty, engineered for healing rather than harm. Lily sat quietly nearby, her hands gripping the arms of the chair, breathing shallowly as she watched Logan lift the brace. Her auburn hair caught the glow of the lamp, her eyes shining with hope and fear in equal measure. She had endured weeks of failure, pain, and disappointment. This moment carried the weight of survival. Thomas hovered close behind her, a protective shadow, broad-shouldered, heavy-hearted, his beard untrimmed from stress, his eyes tired, but burning with love for the daughter he could no longer shield from the world's injustice. Logan knelt before Lily, fastening the brace around her leg with slow, steady hands. "Tell me if anything feels wrong," he murmured. His voice held a firmness softened by quiet reassurance. Ranger stood on Lily's other side, tail still, ears forward, watching every motion like he understood the gravity of the moment. Lily exhaled slowly as she rose, both hands gripping Thomas's arms for balance. Her legs trembled slightly, not from instability, but from the memory of all the failures before. Logan stepped back, giving her space. Ranger stayed close but did not touch her, simply watching with a loyalty so deep it felt like a vow. She took one step. No pain. Another step. Still no pain. Her breath caught in disbelief. Thomas's eyes widened as if he were witnessing a miracle born from equal parts luck and stubborn determination. Logan felt a tightness in his chest loosen for the first time in weeks. Lily took a third step, then a fourth, this time letting go of her father's arm. She stood straight, her body trembling with triumph, shock, and overwhelming relief. Thomas choked on a sob, covering his mouth with a trembling hand. Tears slid into his beard as he looked at Logan, unable to speak. Ranger nudged Lily's leg gently, tail swaying with restrained excitement. Logan let out a slow breath. "We did it," he whispered. But even as joy lit the room, Logan's expression shifted, calm, turning to resolve. "This isn't the end," he said quietly. "Walking again doesn't erase what they did." Thomas nodded, wiping his eyes. "What do we do now?" Logan reached for his old flip phone, an outdated device he kept out of habit more than necessity. He scrolled through contacts until he found a name he had not spoken aloud in years. Michael Reyes. Michael had once been a military lawyer, a sharp-eyed man who stood barely above average height, but carried the intensity of someone who fought and won battles in courtrooms instead of war zones. He was in his early 40s with sun-darkened skin, neatly kept black hair, and glasses perched low on his nose, giving him the look of someone constantly analyzing the world around him. His logic was cold, his compassion quiet, and his sense of justice shaped by cases where soldiers were wrongfully blamed by the bureaucracy meant to protect them. A decade earlier, he had defended Logan during a classified incident. Logan trusted few people. Michael was one of them. Logan dialed the number. After a brief pause, a familiar voice answered, calm, slightly gravelly, shaped by too many late nights and too much black coffee. "Reyes speaking?" Logan got straight to the point. "I need help. Industrial cover-up, malicious injury, potential witness intimidation." Michael didn't curse or gasp. He simply said, "Where are you?" By the next evening, Michael arrived in the mountain town. He stepped into the workshop wearing a charcoal coat, carrying a leather briefcase worn at the edges. He examined Lily's braces with clinical precision, then asked her to recount her injury in detail. His sharp brown eyes softened slightly as he listened, just enough to show the human behind the lawyer. "We have a case," he declared at the end. "A strong one. Thomas exhaled with visible relief. Lily gave a faint, hopeful smile. Logan simply nodded, but Ranger sensed the shift and lay down beside Lily's chair, resting his head on her knee as if promising to stand guard through whatever came next. But Hawthorne Dynamics struck first. The next morning, the town's local news website ran a headline accusing Thomas of tampering with industrial equipment leading to personal injury, accompanied by an unflattering photo of him looking exhausted near the factory gates. The article was full of twisted facts, implying negligence, incompetence, and even a hint of fraud. Thomas clenched his jaw as he read, his knuckles going white. "They're trying to destroy me," he whispered. "And they will fail," Michael replied calmly. "This is standard corporate intimidation." A second report emerged hours later, this time targeting Logan, accusing him of illegally modifying medical devices without certification. The article painted him as a reckless veteran incapable of adjusting to civilian life. Logan read it in silence, his scar tightening subtly as he closed the browser window. A third blow came through email, a legal notice demanding cease and desist, warning of immediate litigation. It was signed by Clara Whitford, Hawthorne's head of corporate legal affairs, a tall woman in her late 40s, known for her severe suits and even sharper tongue. Her reputation for dismantling opponents in court was legendary. Her icy blue eyes, framed by perfectly styled blonde hair, had stared down CEOs and senators alike. She was brilliant, ruthless, and utterly merciless. She was not someone to underestimate, but Michael did not flinch. "Let them threaten," he said. "We have truth." Court day arrived sooner than any of them expected. The courthouse sat at the center of the town, an old stone building with high windows and dark wooden doors weathered by decades of hearings. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras aimed, microphones raised. Logan walked beside Lily, steady but silent. Lily wore a simple knee-length dress beneath a warm coat, her long auburn hair brushed neatly behind her shoulders. Despite her trembling hands, she kept her chin lifted, determination radiating from her thin frame. Ranger stayed close, harnessed but alert, his amber eyes scanning the crowd with instinctive caution. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted to thick quiet. Judges, clerks, and lawyers turned their heads as Lily took her first few steps inside, slow, deliberate, graceful in their fragility. Thomas followed behind her, his eyes bright with pride and fear. Logan walked beside them like a silent sentinel, while Michael carried stacks of documents, ready for battle. Across the aisle sat Hawthorne's legal team, sleek, polished, cold. Clara Whitford stood among them, tall and poised, her icy stare fixed on Lily, as if calculating how to dismantle her before she even spoke. The judge called for order. Logan presented the evidence, photographs of the damaged robot, recordings Thomas had secretly kept, and the disassembled braces showing deliberate sabotage. Michael added expert analysis, connecting every detail with precision that left no room for argument. Clara rose to speak, attempting to dismiss Lily's injury as a result of carelessness. But as she talked, Lily slowly stood from her seat. Every eye turned toward her. With Ranger by her side, she walked, unaided, toward the witness stand. The courtroom fell silent. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. Even the judge paused, eyebrows raised. Her legs trembled but did not fail her. In that fragile but courageous walk, she shattered Hawthorne's narrative. She became the undeniable proof of their cruelty, their lies, and Logan's work. Clara's composure cracked for the first time, a flicker of panic tightening her jaw. The entire room watched Lily take her final step toward justice. The morning sun poured through the courthouse windows with a radiance that felt strangely symbolic, as if the world itself understood that today was the day truth would finally speak louder than fear. Reporters crowded the steps, cameras clicking in rapid bursts, voices overlapping in a chaotic tide. But inside the courtroom there was only quiet, an expectant stillness hanging in the air as the judge took his seat and reviewed the final notes of the case. Logan stood straight beside the wooden table, hands clasped behind his back, posture steady and composed like a soldier awaiting orders. His scar caught the light as he looked toward Lily, who sat beside her father. Her long auburn hair fell around her shoulders in soft waves, and her eyes held a calm determination built through fire and endurance. The earlier tremble in her legs had steadied into a quiet strength. Ranger sat protectively by her feet, the German shepherd's posture tall, ears alert, amber eyes fixed on the proceedings. Even in stillness he radiated unwavering loyalty. Thomas Blake, standing behind his daughter, looked more human today, less weighed down by guilt, more alive with hope. His beard, graying and rough, framed a face carved by years of hardship, but softened now with gratitude and pride. His calloused hands rested on Lily's shoulders, the gesture revealing a father's love that had survived every kind of trial. Across the room, Hawthorne Dynamics' legal team looked far less polished than they had days prior. Clara Whitford, the tall, icy blonde attorney with sharp cheekbones and a reputation for dismantling her enemies, sat rigid, jaw clenched. Her blue eyes flickered with tension she couldn't mask. She still wore her perfectly tailored navy suit, but no amount of professional armor could hide the cracks forming beneath. Hawthorne's CEO, a stout man named Richard Hale, attended for the first time. He was in his early 60s, with silver hair combed meticulously, a round face, and deep-set eyes that darted nervously. His expensive suit strained slightly at his stomach, and a faint sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. He was a man used to commanding boardrooms, not courtrooms where accountability loomed like a storm cloud. Judge Morrison, an older man with thinning gray hair and glasses perched low on his nose, cleared his throat. His lined face, marked by decades of listening to lies and sorting through truth, showed a reserved calm. After reviewing all evidence, he began, his voice steady. This court finds Hawthorne Dynamics legally responsible for the injury sustained by Miss Lily Blake. A wave of emotion rippled through the room. The judge continued, outlining the verdict with clear, decisive authority. Hawthorne Dynamics is ordered to publicly apologize to Miss Blake and Mr. Thomas Blake. The company will pay full compensation for past and future medical treatment. Additionally, criminal investigation will proceed regarding evidence destruction, negligence, and witness intimidation. Hawthorne is further required to establish a fund dedicated to victims of industrial accidents. Thomas exhaled sharply, covering his mouth as if holding back a sob. Lily pressed a hand over her heart, her shoulders trembling with relief that washed over her like warm light. Ranger barked once, soft, celebratory, as if he understood every word. The judge wasn't finished. His gaze turned toward Logan. As for Mr. Logan Carter, this court declares him not guilty of any wrongdoing. His intervention prevented further harm, and his actions are deemed protective in nature. In addition, the Department of Veterans Affairs has expressed interest in appointing Mr. Carter as a safety consultant for rehabilitation programs supporting military veterans. Logan blinked, momentarily stunned. He had expected vindication, but not opportunity, certainly not one that would allow him to help others like him. He nodded slightly in acknowledgement, though the impact of the words hit deeper than he let anyone see. Clara Whitford pursed her lips. Hawthorne executives shifted uneasily. Richard Hale's jaw dropped, his carefully curated composure unraveling. Cameras across the courtroom flashed. Reporters scribbled frantically. Justice for once was loud. As everyone stood to leave, Lily rose carefully, smoothing her coat as Ranger moved to her side. Her steps were confident, steady, guided by the braces Logan had built, but also by something else. newfound strength. Thomas wiped away tears openly now, his rough thumb brushing the corner of his daughter's eye before he embraced her tightly. Outside, the sun dipped lower along the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Logan stood at the base of a small hill outside the courthouse, watching the warm glow spread across the valley. Lily and Thomas approached, walking side by side, with Ranger bounding ahead, tail high and full of joy. The three of them climbed the hill together. The grass rustled under their feet, the scent of pine drifting through the crisp air. At the top, the world opened wide beneath them. Rolling hills, scattered trees, the faint shimmer of a river catching the last light of day. Thomas placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. His palm was rough, trembling slightly from emotion he could no longer contain. "Thank you," he said, voice breaking. "You gave her legs back, but more than that, you gave us justice." Logan looked at him, eyes steady. "You both fought for it," he replied quietly. "I only helped." Lily turned toward them, her face illuminated by the sunset. Her smile was radiant, bright enough to rival the sky behind her. "If I fell before because of them," she said softly, "then I stand now because of both of you." Ranger barked joyfully, circling them, tail sweeping happily across the grass. His body moved with the exuberance of a dog who knew the storm had finally passed. As the sun sank beyond the ridge, the three stood together, silhouetted by the fading light, bound by the struggle they survived and the truth they reclaimed. The future stretched before them not as a dark corridor of uncertainty, but as an open road glowing with hope. A new chapter had begun. In the end, this story isn't just about repaired metal or a courtroom victory. It's about the extraordinary resilience born from pain, the courage to stand even when the world tries to break you, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up on each other. Lily learned to walk again, but more importantly, she learned that hope grows strongest when shared. Logan rediscovered his purpose not in battle, but in helping someone rise. And Thomas found that a father's love can defy corporations, injustice, and fear. And in our real lives, the truth is simple. We all know someone carrying silent wounds, physical, emotional, or invisible. We all face systems that fail us, or people who underestimate us. But like Logan, Lily, and Thomas, we survive by standing together, by speaking up when something is wrong, by choosing compassion and courage over silence. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory.